You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, El Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 96, Speaking Italian. Hello, language lovers. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Speaking Tongues, the podcast in conversation with multilinguals. This week, we are talking about Italian with Elfin of All Things Italian. In this episode, Elfin tells us about learning to speak Italian as a child when her family moved to Italy from the US. We talk about identity and figuring out one's place in between two different cultures. Elfin talks about the expectations versus the reality of life in Italy and how she found a way to fall in love with the country after a period of disillusionment. She tells us about the importance of learning a language for pleasure and how Italian can be useful for this purpose. She gives us a tip for learning the Italian language, and she even tells us how she's been able to inspire her students through travel and prompts, which help them bring Italy closer into their lives. Big thank you to Elfin for sharing this insightful look at Italian language and culture with all of us. If you enjoy episodes of Speaking Tongues, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts, and like and subscribe on YouTube so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. And if you've been a longtime listener of the show or even a recent listener, you can now support the show on buymeacoffee.com. Links to all platforms are in the show notes. Okay, let's chat. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here today with Elfin. How are you today, Elfin?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Elle. So nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you. And we're going to be talking about one of my favorite languages, my love language, the language of my heart.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
I love Italian. You know, I'm practicing, I'm trying, I'm learning. So I'm hoping to learn some stuff from you in this episode. I like to start each episode with the same question, and that is, what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
Okay, so my first language is English. Then at around 7 or 8, when we came to Italy, I learned Italian at school by going to school. And I speak French and Spanish, and I've dabbled with a whole lot of languages, but I wouldn't say I speak them. I'm familiar with them, and I'm proud of that as well.
So that's amazing. So you moved to Italy and you were young when you were picking up the Italian language. Do you remember what that experience was like?
It was scary. It was hard. People say that children pick up languages easily, but I was intimidated. Everybody was speaking another language, and I was the only, well, at the time I was perceived as a foreigner. So, for a child, it was a big deal. And I would make a lot of mistakes and just pick up things along the way. It took me some time. I didn't learn it overnight the way legends, the language learning legends say that children pick it up quickly. Yes, pronunciation perhaps, but other things still take time because children take time in learning languages as well, because you have layers of language that you learn, as a child. So,
right. How long do you think it was for you when you really felt like you've mastered the language?
I wouldn't know that. I mean, as a child, you don't live it that way, I think, because you're still growing in your own language. And for me, it was really complicated. Well, I guess this happens a lot more nowadays, but at the time it was really complicated that, I was growing up in English as well. At home, we only spoke English. My parents wanted to keep my English alive. And so I was growing in that sense as well. And so I wouldn't remember that. Honestly, I wouldn't remember that. For a while, I felt like I was really foreign, But then I found out that's a really common emotion for bilingual children born in bilingual families, that you sort of feel this sense of otherness, that you don't belong in either of the two cultures, if that
Mm,
makes sense. And you sort of have to build another identity. And
mm.
I'm grateful for the online language learning world, also for having helped me understand all of this, even if a little bit later on.
Yeah, it's something that I'm really fascinated with because I didn't have that experience of, speaking one language at home and speaking another language out in the world. And I really find myself drawn to people's stories, like people who have
Mm,
had these experiences. And I just wonder, like, I can imagine how hard it must have been, or how there must have been, difficult times and maybe many
mm.
tears, especially as a kid, because you just, feel like you want to fit in somewhere. But um
Exactly.
yeah, I
It's a
just think,
matter of identity as well. It's not only strictly language aspect. No, it's also a matter of identity. Which is your home? Which is your home language? Which is
mhm,
your culture? You get to, it's in a way it's an opportunity because you get to build your own culture. But as a child, you don't know all of that. You want to just be a part of something without having to get all these extra opportunities.
right. Kids just want to fit in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you have those moments in Italy where you were, you know, making the attempt to, like, be Italian in quotes, like whatever that means or whatever that meant to you?
Yes, yes. And I think that the process, I think I've just completed the process fairly recently in adult age. So it's been a long journey for me. I know it really sounds weird from the outside, but if you're on the inside in a bilingual or trilingual situation, because you have also families now that are, have more, even more languages going on, but it's looking for, I think we all face it. Aside from the language learning aspect, we all sort of live this process of acquiring our identity, showing up for ourselves. And language is one of the tools with which we do that. And we probably learn and assimilate the culture better when we feel that we belong. And for the longest time, I did not feel I belonged to Italy, but at the same time, I didn't feel I belonged to the US or to American culture in any way. What was I? And it's been an interesting journey trying to figure myself out. And yeah,
I imagine that now it's easier to find your tribe of people who maybe have a similar background as you
it's
do.
such a relief. It's really a
Yeah.
relief. Over the last year, speaking to other people, even younger than me, that are facing the same problems, though they have so many more tools, to stay connected with their different cultures. It's a relief. Not that I wish that other people go through what I'm going through, but it's a relief to know I'm not alone. It's always wonderful to know that you have a common journey that you're sharing with other people. And, we get to have conversations about this. And, or you see new to be parents that are asking themselves questions how they can have their culture and the country's culture they're in, bring it all to their children. You want to give the best to your children, and so it's good to share stories and share tips. It makes
Yeah.
things easier for the community as well.
Yeah. I think about that a lot, of just how much more accessible it is to have these conversations. And, like, when I was growing up, I've told this story so many times, but I would look at maps in an atlas
Mhm.
in a book, and I would look at places like Italy, or places like um, Argentina, or Australia, and they I could only imagine what was going on there. Like, I didn't know. I didn't have access to the language at all. So I might have known that they spoke a different language, but I wouldn't have known what it sounded like. I wouldn't have known how people carry themselves. So I think it's really so wonderful that now someone who has that curiosity like I did as a kid, they don't have to open a book. They can go on like Google Map. They can look at the street view
Mhm.
of something, or they can listen to a podcast or a TV show, and they can hear the language, and just the connection points are so there's so many connection points now. Um
Exactly.
it's amazing. I'm
I
just
find it
always fascinated by it.
that's wonderful. That's really wonderful because in the US, were you born in New York or you just live in New York?
No, I was
Okay.
born and raised New York
Oh
City.
wow. Well, so you must have been in New York, you must have been exposed to more cultures though compared to I don't know if you had been born somewhere else in the US where maybe you had access to less different cultures.
Hmm. It's definitely like that here. It is very diverse, but the reality of it for me and for my family is like I grew up in the 80s. So the 80s in New York City was very dangerous.
Yes, I
It
remember.
wasn't, yeah, it wasn't really a place that, we go out and explore different neighborhoods, especially as a black family, as a black
Mm.
woman. It's like this is what I presume. I was a kid, so I don't I don't know that this is
Well,
exactly how my parents felt, but like you kind of you don't have the information on other neighborhoods. So if you get lost, you can't just look at your phone and figure out, you have to rely on a stranger to help you. And,
yes,
in a dangerous city at that time, that with being a young kid, I imagine that's a risk that my parents didn't want to take. So I
absolutely.
didn't have that kind of exposure to cultures other than mine, because in our neighborhood we all look the same, and then
Yes, yes, yes,
10
yes.
10 minutes down the road there's a neighborhood of Polish Americans, Italian Americans, Irish Americans, but like we never went there. So,
Mm.
you know,
Such a good point. Yeah, I tend to forget that New York has changed so much over the decades, and that in the 80s, New York was considered a dangerous place all over the world. Yeah, yeah. I'd sort of, and as a child, you probably didn't have all the information, but you certainly picked up the body language and the emotional cues from your parents. That's what children do. Even if they don't have all the data, they still pick up a lot because we have these little antennas going on, and so
yeah.
you probably filled in lots of blanks. And
Yeah. So, how did you get into teaching Italian online?
I would have never expected it. I'm originally, yeah, really. Well, in a way, it's a good thing because it just shows that life can take you in unexpected directions. Originally, I'm an English teacher, and that's what I was. Certainly, 10 years ago, that's exactly what I was, teaching English in schools and in companies. And then I had some health issues, and I had to stop working for a long time. I had to just focus on getting better, but I still had bills to pay.
Mm.
So as soon as I could handle it, I started trying to think of ways to work and pay those bills. And so I started teaching online, and I started teaching English online, and I started getting requests for Italian. And
Mm.
I was like, Italian? That's the first reaction. Who would really want to learn Italian? I mean, it was just something, you know? And it's funny because at the time of my health issues, my accident, I remember I wanted to leave Italy. I was so fed up with life in Italy, the daily struggles, the economy, and I was really fed up. I was thinking about leaving and going somewhere else. And it's funny that I started getting this in that all that sickness that I wasn't well. I started getting these requests for Italian, and I said, well, why not? And I started teaching what Italian I knew, and I started to get to rewire. I started to see Italy through my students' eyes. I started truly, for the first time in my life, I started truly appreciating what I had where I was living, And I started to see finally the beauty that was where I was in life, that right then and there. I started seeing the beauty there. And it, I think it changed my life really, because it's a great liberating and empowering thought tools realization when you understand that what you have then and there is good.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to run and look elsewhere.
Yeah.
But I just, I wasn't, I didn't start out as an Italian teacher. So I learned it all after. And I would never in a million years, I would have thought I would become so invested, because then, because it was such this life-changing force, really, I'm not exaggerating or anything. I started expanding and deciding this was going to be something temporary. And then I said, no, you know what? I'm staying, I'm doing this. And not only I'm doing this, I'm keeping it up, I'm expanding, I'm building a business on this. When you have these epiphanies, you have these moments of clarity, and you decide, well.
I think it's really wonderful that you are pointing out that you felt, I guess, disillusioned with living in Italy and you were ready to leave,
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't see everything that your students were seeing, because I think particularly Americans, and maybe the whole world actually, like, loves Italy and thinks everything is la dolce vita and just this paradise. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a real place with real
Exactly.
people who have real problems, just like every place else. Um, but I'm glad that you had that opportunity to see the joy of it through your students. And just, I want to know also, like, why did you not think that people wanted to learn Italian?
Oh, well, it's not only me. Every time I go out in the offline world and people ask me what's your job, and it's like, oh my gosh, what do I say? And I answer, I teach Italian. And people say, why people want to learn Italian? That's what the average Italian thinks. It's
That's
because, but I'll tell you why. It's not it's not as crazy as it sounds. We live in a world where people learn languages in order to get fabulous jobs. Oh, maybe not so fabulous jobs. In order to get jobs, you learn English, you learn German, you learn Spanish, you learn Chinese, because one day you learn it. The idea of learning a language for pleasure, the majority of people don't really appreciate that. They don't really know it. Italy suffers from a bit of low self-esteem.
oh,
Italian is seen as a minority language, not a minority language, but a language that is not useful in the sense. You're not going to get a perfect job by learning Italian. That's not why many people learn Italian either. So that is a perception we have here, that it's not useful in any
mm.
way. So people don't expect people to be learning it. So that's
I tell people all the time, like, part of the joy of studying Italian for me is the ability to get close to the culture, because there's so
yeah.
many wonderful aspects of the culture in art, especially if you're an artistic person like I am.
Mm,
Art and food and wine and fashion and all these, everything. But I understand what you're saying, that people, you need a place to live. You need to be able to
mm,
support yourself. So, I
mm.
mean, I can understand why people kind of have that attitude, but I want everyone to learn Italian at some point.
So do I.
so so your students who are coming to you to learn Italian, or people who do express the desire to learn Italian to you, what are some of the common reasons that you've noticed that they have for wanting to speak this language?
I hear the most beautiful reasons. Mostly because they've come to Italy, and something about Italy, Italian life, the country resonated with them. They felt this sense of wow. They feel connected, and they feel like Italy is this missing piece of the puzzle, and they feel complete when they are in Italy. They really feel connected. Feel energized. So that's one of the main reasons. Another reason is, Italian, some people have found answers to some unanswered questions in their lives through Italy and Italian. So they've overcome losses, family losses, or big changes, and they decided to use Italian as a sort of turning point to take charge of their lives again. And I feel really honored that to be a part of this incredible journey, because I think it really takes guts as an adult to decide, what, this is how I lived until now. I want to bring some changes in my life, and it's not easy, but I'll do it. And starting tomorrow, I'm also learning Italian, and through Italian, I'm going to take charge of my life again. And I think that's what we all want a bit of in our own lives. We want to feel like we're bringing some magic in our lives, and
Hmm.
giving more direction and intention to our day-to-day lives.
Yeah. I like that those I love those reasons that this, some of your students have. And
Yes.
I feel that way too. Like for me personally, like being in Italy completely revitalized me the time that I was
Mhm.
living there. And
Where did you live, if I may?
I yeah, I lived in Rimini.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was I miss it.
Of course you do. You've got to come back.
I know. I know. Yeah, I was there for a total of 4.5 months, about 4 months,
Hmm.
4.5 months. This was
Good.
like years ago. But I think there's just yeah, it just really like having that opportunity. And I'm glad I was there and I wasn't in Rome or Milan or, a bigger city, because I think
Such a
that
good point.
yeah, I would have definitely tried to lean on English more if I were in a
Yeah.
big city. And I was in a very not a very small city, but Rimini is it's a beach town.
Oh,
It's small. Um and I didn't meet anyone who spoke English. So I had to there was
were you
one
scared? Were you scared?
um you know I I think that at first I wasn't scared, but
Wow.
over time I did get scared because the stakes got higher, because my Italian, the first couple of days, okay, people understand, like, she doesn't speak the language. But after a month, people were getting sick of me and they were like, when are you gonna, say something in
Okay.
Italian? So I think
Hmm.
the stakes got higher. And, eventually I did settle and I did find that courage to express myself, and even if it was wrong, and do the best that I could. But it was really scary, for example, like going food shopping, because
Wow.
like so I would be checking out and I didn't realize that um I had to get the plastic bags. They had this was in like the early 2000s. So
Hmm.
the girl would ask me a question like, do you want a plastic bag like for your groceries? And I just well, like I didn't have an answer. So I had a lot of those moments where I'd be scared to go into a shop. I had one time I had to go into a pharmacy and I was just like, how do I explain to the pharmacist what's wrong with me and what I need? And we just stared at each other because I didn't have the words and she didn't speak English, to help me. So it
That
was
must have been so hard.
yeah, yeah, it was hard. I was staying with a friend, and this friend did speak English, but this friend was also working all day. So on I was on my own for most of the time. So, but I made it, and Italian is still that language that I recall the quickest. Like even if
Wow.
I'm not saying the right thing, it still tries to come out in Italian.
Well, I think that anyway, that it was really a growing experience for you, aside from the language. I mean, it really takes courage to do that. And it must have been hard, but you were in a way, yeah, lucky. You were in Rimini because still, I don't know, I think that Rimini at the time must have been welcoming enough. I mean, aside from the practicalities of buying day-to-day things, which is obviously really hard, but I think it's a nice place to be in Rimini. Emilia-Romagna in general is a nice region that I really,
And that's where I learned to appreciate food.
of course you did.
That's where I learned how to like properly cook pasta and how like, oh, this is what tomatoes are supposed to taste like. Like I just that's when I became like a foodie. Really interested, not a foodie, but that's when I became really interested in food. So I owe a lot to Emilia Romagna.
Okay, that's very good to hear.
So tell me for your students, or for me, maybe I'm asking for myself a little. Do you have any good like tips and tricks for learning Italian and maybe things that you think that a person needs to have if they want to master the Italian language?
Well, this may not sound, I don't know what it sounds actually, but here's the thing. What I've noticed is that people approach language learning as adults with, well, maybe not you, I mean, multilingual people, but the biggest mistake I see people approaching Italian is by trying to do it the way they would do it at school, which does not make I know why they're doing it. It's something I would do as well. I understand the reasons, but it doesn't make much sense in that you are not that person anymore. Because what happens is that they try to do it the way they would do it at school, only that you're an adult. Somebody is not, you cannot be forced to do something you don't want to do anymore. Being, I have to do this is not a good, sound enough reason when you're an adult, right? And then you clash into the reality of what language learning as an adult is, and you get discouraged saying, oh, I'm not tailored for languages, I'm not good at, I don't have the language gene. Or no, you're just going about it the wrong way. And there's a lot of resistance to this idea that you can unlearn what you learned at school. That is the whole, there are many ways you can approach language learning. Maybe you are not a grammar person, and that's perfectly okay. Or maybe you are a grammar person, and that's okay too. Just, I help my students figure out who they are, what makes them, what resonates with them, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and then build upon that. Unlearn the whole school attitude towards things, the one size that has to fit everybody, and try to find something that works for you. We don't have 7 hours a day anymore to listen to a teacher at school speak in Italian. We don't have the mental energy, but that's a good thing, because the minute we take the messiness of adult life and make something beautiful out of it, it has even more value than when we have it forced down our throat at school by some teacher. Just embrace the messiness and unlearn some of the ideas that you have. Oh, I must do this. Take away the I should, I must, and just find somebody that can sort of guide you and tap into your strengths and embrace this journey with curiosity.
What are some of the methods that you use that with your students and that sparks their curiosity?
I try to have, if I say multisensorial approach, it sounds bigger than it is, basically, what I do in reality. And I have a beautiful guide, the Italian Magic Corner, that sort of illustrates how to find something that works for you with your time. But basically, I give prompts on, maybe you want to listen to a podcast, maybe you want to learn with a recipe. You can learn by cooking, you can learn by eating. You don't like to cook, fine, I don't like to cook either. You can learn by eating, let me show you how. Or you want to learn from TV shows, great, I can help you with that as well. Or maybe you want to learn with poetry, or you want to learn journaling. There are ways to make it work for you with your time requirements, with your emotional requirements. I mean, for example, now we are in a pandemic. We may not have the brain power, or maybe we do have the brain power. We want to escape our reality and think about something else entirely. But we have to be kind to ourselves and allow the possibility that maybe we have to do something different. And that's good. We tend to resist different things. We are creatures of habit.
Mm-hmm.
But once we allow that possibility in our lives, we can tap into our strengths and find out something wonderful. I have this one student, she just, her jam is learning from books. She reads a little bit and then she writes a summary. I overlook this, I see how she wrote the summary, we talk about it. And over the years, that's what she's been doing, and she's become really good at it. And that's what really makes her happy. She's just so proud of it. Or people who do it through songs, music. And that's a wonderful way. That's a wonderful approach. And I guess the problem with that is people tend to think that, oh, but that's just having fun. And that is something that infuriates me because, first of all, fun is really important.
Yeah.
I mean, our lives are important. We have one life. It's not just fun. We have to allow fun in our lives. We have to survive this pandemic. We have to have fun in our lives. So it's not just fun. But you know what I mean? It's not the idea of, it's the idea that if it's not productive, if it's not boring in a way, but language learning is not a chore. I don't have to tell you, of course. And probably people who are listening to this podcast don't need to know that language learning should not be a chore. But you cannot rely on motivation alone. That's why it's so important to bring inspiration, but bring it into your daily life, especially with Italian, that is so full of prompts in and of itself, right? And it's possible to bring a little bit of Italy into your daily life quite easily and nurture that connection with Italy. And
Yeah. To me, that's like a form of self-care.
absolutely,
You know?
language learning, like a date, like take yourself out for a date, you know? How
Mm-hmm.
are you going to treat yourself today?
Yeah. I really love that you encourage your students to, I guess, look to what really, like you said, what inspires them, what sparks them, what's interesting to them. Because, you know, I kind of fell into that trap too of like, oh, I'm
We all
gonna,
do.
yeah,
Me
everybody
too.
does it because we don't know how. So I love that you are able to be that guide and just tell people like it's okay. Um, one of the things that I really enjoy, you know, I love cooking, I love food, but wine is one of those things for me,
Yes.
especially with Italian. Like, holy macaroni, there's so many, there's wine from Trieste to Lecce. Like, there's wine
Mhm.
everywhere, and there's so much to know. And for me, like, I want to get a little bit better first, but I want to like take that journey and express myself, you know, in Italian through wine, you know,
Mhm.
and I think that's like, you know, you have so many outlets when it comes to the Italian language to really express yourself and connect with. So it's I just think it's so wonderful that you encourage your students to find what they enjoy to connect with.
Well, I'm thinking about your wine thing. And there's so many ways you can go with that. And I think we have all these resources, and sometimes it can be overwhelming because we don't know how to sort of join the dots. But for example, with wine, you mentioned this wine from Trieste to Sicily. So you can use the wine, like you're drinking a glass of wine, that can be a learning experience because you're activating your eating, you're activating your senses, your taste, and your so any words you absorb while you're drinking or eating in general are associated with food, with taste buds, and that activates parts of your brain that will store the memory much longer. So it's not that you learn more from a grammar book. On the contrary, the brain, because we take in pleasure and we feed on oxytocin so much, it will absorb the memory and make an association with the wine. But you can also use the wine to take virtual journeys, which is what I encourage my students to do all the time, my clients especially, to travel to Italy virtually. Just take that wine. Where is this place in Italy? Well, let me look on YouTube. Where can I find a video of this place? Okay, Trieste. Let's see what is in Trieste. Let's look it up in Wikipedia. Let's see if I can find a video. Maybe there's some music there. Are they playing concerts? Let me look on TripAdvisor. What places can I go to? Organize a trip. Look for hotels. That way, well, how long does that take? 10 minutes in a day. Organize yourself a little virtual trip to Trieste. You've nurtured your emotional connection to Italy. You created an experience. We learn from experiences. We create memories in our hearts. We make emotional connections with experiences, and that is what we keep and we bring along with us. I want people to have beautiful experiences while learning Italian, so that even if they decide to quit tomorrow, they still have something worthwhile to remember. And the thing is, you don't quit tomorrow if you're doing this, because you enjoy it. It becomes a part of you, and it's so empowering. I want my students to feel that they are calling the shots is a big word, but that they are sort of
In
more
control.
in charge. Yeah, well, in control might be overwhelming for some, the tender, the soft-hearted. But yes, I want them to feel like they're part of it, not me teaching. No, I'm there. I'm aiding and abetting language learning. I'm cheering you on. I like to feel that I'm a partner in crime with my students, and that together we are on this journey, and I'm sort of on the other side saying, hey, go on, let's do this. Oh, let's take this detour. And I'm a big fan. I don't know about you, El, but I'm a big fan of rabbit holes. Going down language learning rabbit holes has to be the most fun, rewarding, and you learn so much in the process.
Hmm.
And that's why I recommend keeping a tiny log, because then you look back and see, wow, I've done all this stuff, and it's fun. It's fun. It's fun.
It is fun. That's why when you said it takes like a couple minutes to plan a trip, and I in my head I'm like, I would be in a hole for hours because I would just be looking up so many different things.
Well, you put a timer. That's a solution to everything. You put a
Yes.
timer and say, okay, thumbs up, time's up.
Tell me some things, and I realize that we haven't spoken much of the Italian language in this episode. So if there's any Italian you want to throw at me and throw at us, please do. Um, but I want to ask you about some of the culture in Italy. Like, you're living in northern Italy, and you've also lived in the south of Italy, right?
Yes, yes,
Tell
yes, yes.
us
That's my hometown. Yes.
tell us about some of the um tell us about some of the unique things about each place that you've been in.
Um, there are big differences between North and South. North is more efficient, more busy, and they're different time zones in a way. I mean, we are all in the same time zone, but I don't know. In northern Italy, people eat very early. I don't know. They'll have lunch at 12 and dinner at 7 or 6. And in the south, you have lunch and dinner much later than that. When I call up my friends and I say, you still haven't eaten, it's 9 o'clock. Because when I come back north, I forget all the habits. Then the weather is different, and I guess there's a different energy. People often say, how could it must have been difficult for you to go north when the weather is really bad and a very different culture. But there's something about life in the South is very laid back. And I love that. But I also like this energy in the North where, people are just very efficient, trying to do stuff, busy, volunteering, and so on in their own way. And I like this mixture, these two sides to this country, the hustle and the bustle of the North, hustle and bustle Italian style, and and then the slowness, this ancient lifestyle of the South. I would never have learned to appreciate it if I hadn't come to the North.
Mm.
But yes, there's so many tiny things that. And then how Italian changes, the different words, even some prepositions are used differently, the different dialects. I have my neighbor. He's a lovely person. He's 87. He
Oh.
speaks to me in Cremonese dialect, and I have no idea what he's saying. I just smile, and he smiles, and we sort of, we know we're not insulting each other. We mean well. And I'm trying to develop an ear, but the dialect is really difficult when, especially older people tend to speak tighter, more dialect than younger person.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, and then the food, how the food changes. Northern food would be more, they use butter more. And it's, a kind of cuisine that you have in colder weather, whereas in the south, it's more recipes more revolve around olive oil
Mm.
and fish, and here is more around meat and different kind of vegetables and that.
Yeah. It's so interesting. It's always interesting to me how Italy is just a country of regions. And it's so hard to generalize. There are, like you said, in the north there are similarities, but I imagine in between those regions, like things are.
There are the differences because
Yeah.
we, I don't have to tell you. I mean, you certainly know. I mean, Italy was all divided until the 1870s in different, dominated by different cultures, different countries. This area was under the Austrians, and then there were the French in other areas. Then in the south we had the Spanish, Sicily, the Arabs way back, of course. So, and all that has made a very diverse culture inside. And even from one town to another, you see the differences in architecture, just really striking differences, and even small linguistic differences.
I want to talk to you about the retreats
Yes.
that you do. And I'm so intrigued by this because I think it's just I just think it's a perfect thing. Tell us about the retreats. Like, how did they come about, and where do you go? What do you do on them?
Yes, we do. We go to my hometown. It's a tiny town, Gaeta, and it's 1 hour from Rome and 1 hour from Naples. So it's located quite strategically. It's on the sea. It's a very quaint town. People live in a very old-fashioned way, slowly. My mantra for this retreat is learn Italian dolcemente. That is dolcemente, softly, quietly, with ease. And that's how people live in my hometown, very slowly. If it's a beautiful day, they'll take the day off and go and soak in some sun, take a walk. Going to buy bread, going to farmers market is a social event. You get to meet people, hang out. People are in the streets. You see senior citizens on benches chatting, children playing in the streets, fishermen making nets, fish boats coming in. It's just, it's like back in time. Time has stopped there. And when I was staying there, when my mother was still alive, I would be there and share pictures. When I had my house there, I would share scenes, Instagram stories from there, and people loved it. And that gave me the idea of hosting a retreat there and helping my students experience life in Italy. Because, there's only so much you can learn in a language. You get to a point that you've learned the language. Okay, now what? If you're not able to go that next level of seeing what lies behind the words, the lifestyle that lies behind the words, the culture, coming to this small town, you get to take a break from your life, take some time for yourself, treat yourself, slow down. And part of the retreat, the weather's so lovely, we're always outside. The town is our classroom. I I pull the strings, so to speak. I create situations. So one day, for example, we go to farmers market. We go to see the fish market. But no, we also go and see the fruit and the produce market, and then the clothes market. And there I have some little prompts to navigate situations, to live the situations. Then we go and visit the old parts of town. It's all. Then we do some treasure hunts of the monuments of the
Oh my
town.
god.
And I got my students last year. Was beautiful. Each person had to tell me what the monument was about. And that was incredible because I had to go online, research the church, research the castle. Then they told me, and then I would fill them in on any extra stuff. And then that created a sort of connection between them and the monument. And after they would say, that is my church. And that built a connection. There's so much history in that town. There are fortifications and there are beautiful views. And it's just all so conducive to building, creating a memorable moment. And I'm very open about my challenges, my day-to-day life. So people, when they come together, they feel ready to share their experiences quite openly with us, and they build relationships. And people in Gaeta are, small town people. That is, that they will start talking to you very easily. If you're in line waiting for the bread and say, oh, you really should get this kind of bread, or you should get that kind of, oh, they'll give you suggestions. If you buy fish, they'll give you suggestions on how to cook that fish. So the opportunities to connect and build feel part of a community as opposed to feeling like a tourist are endless. And I get really emotional about this because it's wonderful to see. Last year, 2 participants had already been. They decided to come again because they wanted to be a part of it again. And they were so happy to see that, after the lockdown, after all they'd read about Italy, people were still there pulling on, and they felt so connected. And it's because here's the thing, you go and visit Rome, Naples, Florence, and that's wonderful, but you might not have the tools to appreciate what you're seeing, because you'll end up going into the main tourist spots. Many people speak English.
Exactly.
You're not building a connection.
Right.
You just have this incredible to-do list of things that you have to visit. Instead, if you come to my retreat, you start to see Italy from the inside with a very old-fashioned lifestyle where cooking together is a big deal because Italians cook together. And then after you've experienced the retreat and seen what life in Italy actually is, then maybe you have the tools to navigate big cities like Rome and Florence or Naples, because you know the culture behind all of that, and you're not just ticking off spots from your tourist to-do list,
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that really touched me, how so many of my students and clients complained about feeling like they were trapped. They would come to Italy and feel trapped in a tourist bubble, and how they really enjoyed the small day-to-day things like having coffee with me in the piazza, or boiling the water for the pasta and helping slice the onions, living
Mm-hmm.
it.
When I think of going to Italy, there's a million things I could think of, but when I think of the experience that I want, that's the experience that I want. I want the experience of being in a small town and actually understanding the way that people go throughout their day, understanding the things that people do because that's the way they've always been done, and
Mm.
how traditions are expressed, and everything you're describing, I think is, you know I wonder how many people actually have this kind of experience when they go to Italy, or are they
Mm-hmm.
just doing the triangle of like Milan, Florence, Rome, Venice? Are they just staying on the bus and seeing you know the Vatican, the Sistine Chapel, the Venezia, or are they actually stopping in the little towns and actually communicating with people? And I don't think many people have that kind of opportunity. So I think it's wonderful that you're offering this opportunity to people, um, to slow down and really experience like just the heart of this country, this culture.
You know, I really appreciate what you just said. I think that we all need to slow down. I mean, if there's anything that we've learned from the last 2 years, is that we need to give ourselves a bit of grace. We need to allow ourselves to be kinder to ourselves, because we're really plain nasty to ourselves. We wouldn't do to anybody what we do to ourselves. We wouldn't say to anybody things we say to ourselves. And I think that the retreat is this opportunity to be really kind. I'll tell you another assignment I gave. One of my students, he was from Germany, and he was like, I'm not a sea person. And I said, okay, sure. Of course you're not a sea person. I don't know what to do with the sea. Oh, sure. And I said, look, your assignment this morning is to go buy yourself a swimsuit, a towel, and you go to the beach, stay there for 2 hours. I don't want to see you for 2 hours. You are the only, and then report to me. You don't do anything, nothing. For 2 hours, you stay at the beach, and then only send me a picture of yourself as proof that you've been there. And he was like, after those 2 hours, he sent me a picture of himself, a selfie. He was just glowing. And he said, I did nothing for 2 hours. It was wonderful. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it sounds absurd, but sometimes we need somebody from the outside that gives you permission to not do nothing and just take in the sight, be with everybody else
Mhm.
at the beach, watch the family and children play, and stop a second. The world is not going to fall apart if you stop a second and you're not cramming stuff into your brain. I schedule breaks because all of this is quite impactful. You know, you're taking all of this in, it's another culture. So I tell people before they even join, look, you're going to take, first of all, because Italians take breaks. After lunch, you take a break. And so you're going to take a break. We're not going to cram every hour of the day with things to do. You have to take time to just let all this sink in and become a part of you and, you know, gracefully take all this in. And sometimes we need somebody from the outside to say, you know, it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to, you know, just experience things.
Mhm. How can we be a part of this retreat? And by we, I really mean me. But for other people who are listening, who are equally ready to have a retreat with you, what can we do? How can we join you?
Okay. Well, first of all, before I tell you how you can join me, you can create your own retreat at home. You can. It's possible. Not in the same way, but you can tap into all of that with all the resources out there. The actual retreat that is happening in May in 2022, yes, this year, I'm hosting two this year, and I'll be opening registrations shortly as well. People can join by signing up at the link in my retreat page or just signing up for my newsletter. And I have a waiting list on the website, allaboutitalian.com. Um, or always on my website, you'll find the retreat page, but you'll also find you can sign up for the newsletter where I also let my readers know the when the retreats are on and when registrations are opening. Otherwise, you can come on Instagram. I'm very active on Instagram, and people can find out, follow me there and be updated. I post stories from the retreats. There's a lot of video content from the retreats in my Instagram as well, in my Instagram highlights.
What is your Instagram for all of us who
All
want to
about
find you?
Italian.
All about Italian. Okay, so I will add your Instagram, your website, your links in the show notes for this episode so that people who want to get in touch with you can people who are listening that want to get in touch with you can just click the links and find you right away.
Great, excellent.
Well, Elfin, thank you so much for joining me
Well,
for this
thank you for
conversation.
having me. This has been lovely.
Yes, I've had so much fun talking with you and learning about the culture and just learning about, you know, being I feel like I'm gonna say mindful, but that's not the word I want, but like
No, it's not.
it's
But
like
intentional, maybe intentional.
intentional. Yeah. You know, this is it was nice to talk about intentionality in learning a language and
Absolutely.
especially like I said at the beginning, a language that is in my heart, so deeply in my heart. It really meant a lot to talk with you today and I had a great chat.
Okay. Thanks for having me, really, Elle. It was an incredible conversation.
I like to end each episode on the same question, and that is, do you have any jokes, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Italiano to share?
Yes, because we'll be talking about food as well, I'll end with this expression that a famous actor who was passionate about cuisine said. He said, fritta è buona anche una ciabatta, which literally means fried, even if you cook them fried, even slippers are good to eat. Basically, it doesn't translate very well, but he was so passionate about fried food that he said that if you know how to fry something well, even you can even cook ciabatte, which are slippers. And it's true that if you fry well, I'm not a passionate about fried food, but if you know how to do it lightly enough, it can enhance flavors very well. So that is my contribution. The actor who said this was Aldo Fabrizi.
Mhm.
And yes, and he said this thing, this famous
Can
fritta è buona anche una ciabatta.
can you teach it to me?
Yes, fritta è
Fritta
buona,
è buona. Fritta è
anche
buona anche
una
una
ciabatta. Ciabatta è
ciabatta.
slipper. Ciabatta è slipper.
So ciabatta, like the
The
bread.
bread, yes, exactly, because it's big shaped like a slipper should be.
Oh my goodness. All this
And
time.
you see, you learn languages through food. See, I mean, do we need any further proof? Look, look, look where a pair of slippers has brought us.
I'm never gonna forget that now. Like ciabatta.
Exactly.
Wow. Grazie. Grazie.
Di nulla.
How did I never
This
know
was
that
fun.
before? That's interesting. Oh, that's so fun. Well, thank you so much again. And oh, before I let you go, really quickly, in this situation, we've been talking for a while and, really enjoying this conversation in Italian. What would be the best way to say goodbye?
Alla prossima.
Alla prossima.
Because so we know that we're going to meet again.
Certo. Grazie,
Grazie a
Elfin.
te, El.
Grazie. Alla prossima. And I'll talk to you soon.
Buona giornata.
Buona
Ok.
serata. Ciao.
Ciao, 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 ciao.